So welcome back, everybody. Apologies that we are running a little bit late, but yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed a quick break, and we're back now with our next session of the day. So having looked at Spectrum Awards and auctions first thing this morning, we're now going to be moving on to look at connecting unserved and underserved regions and closing the digital divide. And before that, we're also going to have a thinking point looking at fixed wireless access, maybe and how that can work in urban and suburban areas as well. But to explain more and to introduce our speakers and the issues, I'd now like to pass over to Jean-Jacques Massima from ITU, who's going to be moderating this session. JJ, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will try to mix the session and the keynote. And particularly, I would like to present Mr. Dobek Pater, which is coming from Africa Analysis. And he will speak about some wireless technologies, access, and so on. And as you know, the main view on these technologies is to try to connect the unconnected. Of course, all of you know that, okay, ITU is mandating and to connect the world. That's why it's connecting the world. But actually, yes, we can say that, okay, merely COVID has helped us to make some significant progress. Before COVID, we have to retain that, okay, before COVID, there was more than 7 billion of devices, which is equivalent to the population on the Earth, but only 3 billion were connected. After COVID, more than 4 billion are connected, so just 1/3 is now remaining unconnected. This is not to say that, okay, maybe in some urban areas and so on, people like you have 2-3 devices, whereas in other parts of the world, there is no connection, no devices in use. But let us see what's about the technology first, and I will introduce my panelists after for the country cases, experiences, manufacturer point of view, and also some pilot projects in Alaska. Thank you. Dobek, you have the floor for your keynote, please.
Thank you very much, Jean-Jacques. Good afternoon. No, it's still is it afternoon? No, not yet. Lunch is at noon. Yeah, good to see everyone here. As introduced, my name is Dobek Pater. I'm from a company called Africa Analysis. We do market research analysis, advisory or consulting services in the ICT space and telecoms IT services and tech, expanding effectively where most of their clients go. And we do that across Africa. And one of the things that we've been looking at increasingly and more recently is the topic of expanding broadband connectivity and affordability of those broadband services. So we all know we've got a large gap in Africa. People are not using broadband services at all, or when they're using broadband services, they may be insufficient use for what they actually need to achieve in their lives. So that what I'm going to do is present just top line findings, a summary of some of the research and analysis we've been doing across the African continent, and it looks at broadband and specifically wireless broadband, fixed wireless access technologies as a means of connecting more individuals, more households. In this instance, over time, both across the urban and rural environments. And we all know that Africa is predominantly a wireless environment, certainly at present, and that's why wireless technologies, I think, do hold a large part of the secret to unlocking that dearth of broadband going forward. So I'm just going to have 3 sections to the presentation. It's going to provide a brief background of where we are in Africa as a society when it comes to internet broadband services. We'll then look at what we modeled as examples of what can be achieved with using certain regulatory leverages and effectively aiming to lower the price of delivery of broadband services. And then a discussion of regulatory tools that can be used to achieve that, or at least achieve part of alleviating part of the problem of expanding broadband infrastructure and increasing adoption of broadband services. And I think most of these regulatory tools are known, but they're not necessarily being put into practice, whether on purpose or not. If you have any questions, I think we need to hold them to, I didn't press anything. Okay, oh, I know. Okay, I pressed the wrong button. I think any questions that you may have is probably better to hold for the session afterwards, for the discussion group. So if we look at Africa, or maybe let's better start with why do we need broadband and broadband in Africa? And as Jean-Jacques mentioned, I think COVID has all taught us a lesson, and that's a valuable lesson, that without broadband, the world cannot really exist in the form it is now, and households in that world. And going forward is just going to become more important. So as we move into the digital era, we go through that transformation to arrive at a much more data-enriched environment down the line. We are going to need broadband services to effectively be able to take care of our socio-economic reality and participate fully in it. If we do not, we're going to be sidelined as individuals, households, societies, and whole countries, effectively as the world moves on. So we need it for work, entertainment, e-government services, to stay healthy, etc. So broadband is a critical element of our daily lives, increasingly so. But it's not just good enough to have broadband. What needs to be made available is what's called by some organizations as meaningful broadband. And meaningful broadband has effectively 4 characteristics, and that's you need to have the right speed. So if you have a minimum broadband speed, it often is insufficient to be able to fully participate in the new emerging society and the workplace. You need to have adequate devices. Again, 3G phones no longer sufficient, 4G minimum, but increasingly 5G in the mobile space, but also increasingly important having proper CPEs for your fixed connectivity, whether it's wireline or wireless. There needs to be enough data. If you're only able to buy half a gig, 1 gigabyte of data a month, again, not sufficient. We're starting to talk about a minimum of 10 gigabytes per household, but more likely per individual pretty soon, and 50, 60 gigabytes per household on a monthly basis. And it needs to be at a price where it's affordable. And then frequent connection to the internet. So again, if you're only connecting, making use of that service sporadically, once every few days, a couple times a month, doesn't really do much good. It needs to be on a daily basis and multiple times throughout the day. And if you live in the urban environment, increasingly we're moving into an environment where we're constantly connected, wherever you are, moving between different technologies and seamlessly, often now seamlessly, effectively transiting from one to another and staying connected. If we look at Africa, against that background where we want to be and what we need to have and to achieve, we're not doing very well. In fact, I think we could say that the case, that the picture is pretty dismal in relation to the rest of the world, but we all know that. Internet use by individuals is the lowest out of all global regions. Globally, the average is 63%. In Africa, it's 33% of individuals. I think the positive note there is that if we break it down by age categories, age groups, cohorts, then the youth tends to use the internet more often, so that the percentage of use is higher among youth in Africa, which means bodes well for the future. As we move forward, more people are now internet literate and know how to use it and prepared to use it. If we look at fixed broadband penetration, that's all wired and wireline services. At the end of last year, it was 9% out of approximately maybe 280 million households in Africa. So again, quite low. This graphic is very busy, but effectively what it says is mobile broadband penetration of population on top, fixed broadband, let me move here, fixed broadband at the bottom. And again, the story that tells is not great. So if you look at the right-hand side of those graphics, the blue bars, it's a handful of the richer island states, some countries in Southern Africa and mostly North Africa, where connectivity is a fairly high level. penetration of mobile and also to an extent fixed broadband. But when you start going into the long tail, a lot of countries where it's, particularly on the fixed broadband side, where it's next to non-existent in realistic terms. We focus a bit more on the mix of technologies used in Africa for provision of fixed broadband connectivity. So the more upper left-hand graphic is for the totality, all African countries and territories. And we see there that DSL is still in excess of 60% of all connections. And there are in the region of 25, maybe more now, million connections on the continent, fixed broadband. But that DSL is predominantly present in North Africa, some in South Africa, decreasing quarter on quarter, as we know. So if we strip out the North African countries and look at sub-Saharan Africa, the mix of technologies changes, and we're now starting to see that wireless, and within that, fixed wireless access is starting to play a much more important role. And that's where the majority of the African population households is, sub-Saharan Africa. For the purposes of our study analysis, we split out fixed wireless access into two categories. One is fixed 4G and fixed 5G, and then the other fixed wireless access technologies, and that could be technologies such as Tarana, for instance, that's now being used in South Africa by Supersonic, MTN Group company. Other radio technologies across the continent are being used. I think what we're starting to see here is that fixed wireless access is becoming very apparent as a versatile technology that can start solving our problems of connectivity. And it can provide two things that can start closing the broadband gap we've got in Africa. One is increased coverage, so it's quicker and typically cheaper to roll out fixed wireless access services than it is wireline. So you can get the networks out faster and further, increased coverage. And also through that, the fact that the total cost of ownership is lower the cost of providing services, retail services to customers. And that's going to expand the addressable market, the opportunity to start buying broadband services and using them meaningfully. And we'll see in subsequent slides that specifically when we look at fixed 4G and fixed 5G now coming into the picture, those two technologies are probably best placed for a number of reasons to start addressing that gap and alleviating our problems of insufficient broadband penetration and use in Africa. So if we focus to a great extent on fixed 4G and 5G, typically technologies used by the mobile network operators, not exclusively, but they tend to be the larger operators that use them a lot more widely. Now, the MNOs obtain the spectrum. They have spectrum assigned from the regulatory authorities. And that spectrum is on a national basis, and normally not all of that spectrum is used everywhere across the territory on a national basis. So for mobile broadband purposes, you'll find a lot of spectrum usage and running into spectrum dearth constraints in the urban environment, high density environment. But as you move out of that high densified urban environment into peri-urban, semi-rural, and certainly into rural areas, the use of that spectrum becomes less intense. So there's spectrum left over. That leaves an opportunity to actually start deploying other services into using that spectrum, and that's fixed 4G, fixed wireless access services. MNOs normally also have an advantage to other operators, particularly wired operators, the wireline operators, and smaller operators, wireless operators, in terms of infrastructure they already use and have access to, and the costs associated with it. So they've already incurred some of those costs and are incurring them. So they don't need to incur all of them from the beginning. Those advantages are passive infrastructure, so they have sites on towers. These towers, passive infrastructure may belong to them. They may be leasing it, but they already have it. It often can accommodate additional equipment to be deployed, additional RAN. They have some of the active equipment on sites that's required for deployment of 4G. Site backhaul they have. They either leased capacity and may have more than enough capacity for MBB, sufficient for also carrying fixed traffic. They may own that infrastructure themselves in many cases, so it's not too expensive for them to actually increase capacity on that backhaul. And we already spoke about spectrum, where they often have, at least initially, to start off with prerequisite spectrum to start deploying those services. They don't need to try and get that spectrum to begin with, although they typically would need more as time goes by and demand for services increases. And if we look on the right-hand side, that's a pictorial representation of where 4G and 5G exists in Africa. So bar a few countries, just about every country has 4G and expanding. And we've got 13 countries that have started deploying 5G. And if we exclude, again, a number of those smaller island states, then we've got about 10 countries on the African continent just starting to deploy 5G, some a little bit more advanced than others. But that means that initial commitment is already going in from a CapEx perspective and infrastructure availability perspective that can be leveraged for fixed services. And it also means that because we're in the process of deploying them, the opportunity is still quite high in those regions. So still a lot of opportunity for 4G and opportunity for 5G just emerging. And I think just to underscore that, what I mentioned now is that spectrum, even though it's available, it needs to be available in sufficient quantity. So, it's as infrastructure gets deployed, services offered, as the addressable market expands and traffic grows, use of services grows, that spectrum needs to be augmented by additional spectrum in order to ensure that meaningful broadband is sustained. The quality of the services provided doesn't degrade. And I see I've got 20 minutes to go, so I'll speed up. If we look at fixed wireless access, we developed a model, ran a number of scenarios on it. And effectively, it's to illustrate what happens when you do a number of things through regulatory intervention, using regulatory tools, if the market doesn't address it by itself. And that, on the one hand, we have retail price variation or declines. On the other hand, a decline in input costs for the operators, so effectively the CapEx. And if we look at the upper graphic versus lower graphic, it effectively illustrates what can happen when you have a 15% decline in retail price over time on, say, the average prices that we have now for fixed broadband connectivity, fixed wireless connectivity specifically. And over a period of about 10 years, with a 15% variation on the average prices, pegged at about $20 in Africa, across the board, we realize an 11% increase in households being connected. But that price can go even further, that retail price. Obviously, not to the point of making operators unsustainable. This is an illustration. We picked 5 countries as examples to broadly represent different regions in Africa and mix of countries. And again, it illustrates that there is an opportunity to expand the addressable market and actual customers on fixed wireless access as retail prices decrease. And it varies from country to country, depending on those countries' characteristics. The little sort of zigzags in the line effectively just it's an effect of modeling price variations of fixed wireless access versus other competing technologies that provide broadband services over time. So, there's an element of churn calculated into the model. And as I mentioned a minute ago, it is important for the operators to have sustainable operations. So that's where the supply side regulatory tools can assist. We don't want operators, service providers that are going to start up and fail in the next 2 or 3 years. It's not going to do anyone any good. Certainly not the end users, not the countries, and not the operators themselves. So with reduction in the input costs, we can create greater sustainability of the operations from a CapEx perspective and then subsequently OpEx perspective. And that effectively brings me to the last section of the presentation, a toolbox, a regulatory toolbox to address spectrum management supply side, which pertains to the operators, the service providers, as well as demand side part of the market, the end users. And regulatory authorities have a range of these tools available to them that if the market is starting not to perform as it should, for instance, from a competitive perspective, they can intervene to stimulate the market, to expedite deployment of broadband services and adoption of those services. Spectrum cuts across all of these measures that regulators have available to them, and not just the telecommunications or communications regulatory authorities, but any government regulatory authority in a country. From the supply side, what I think is important is to look at and consider elements that will contribute to decreasing the cost, input costs, and that's things such as import duties on equipment, on the network equipment, and also introduction of regulations around infrastructure sharing, not necessarily on the towers, but other network infrastructure elements, components, especially in markets where that doesn't exist yet, and the use of universal service fund to assist the operators in driving that. Now, universal services funds, when mentioned, often make people laugh, but it doesn't have to be that way. We've got examples such as Ghana, for instance, where it works quite well, where the USF is of great assistance to start deploying infrastructure into rural areas and semi-rural areas to alleviate broadband availability constraints. From a demand side perspective, again, look at policies that enforce the competition measures taken or introduce those policies, because competition is important to drive the retail prices down. But it's not only that. Also look at reduction or even elimination of import duties, taxes on excise taxes, for instance, on CPEs, and also on usage. There are countries where voice services and data services are taxed. And if broadband is supposed to build an economy and be a contributor towards stimulating economic growth, it's very difficult to achieve that if at the same time the government tries to tax those services currently in order to generate short-term revenue, sacrificing long-term development of the society and the economy in the process. So we need to look at it holistically and with a long-term view. It's not a year, it's about 10 to 20 years and beyond. And then look at potential subsidies of those services and the end user equipment. And that can take various forms. Some have been tried successfully, some unsuccessfully. But I think that there are mechanisms and certainly business models that can be explored to use money generated by the industry in order to support those individuals and households within the society that are not able to afford meaningful broadband at this point in time. So that's by way of introduction. I think we're going to discuss the topic further. And I think welcome to the debate. I'll hand over to Jean-Jacques.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lobek. I think, yes, you are ready for lunch, but you had already some meat during the coffee break. So I think part of the lunch is already served. I don't want to stand between you and the lunch. This is the rule of the conference. But let me switch in French to be sure that, okay, you are following up now. I want the interpreter to balance their workflow. So je vais passer en français. Comme ça, vous allez prendre vos écouteurs pour ma session. Alors, cette session est très importante au moment où les administrations, les pays sortent de la conférence mondiale de développement de Kigali et de la conférence des plénipotentiaires de l'UIT. Tout ce dont on parle dans cette session, connecter les zones rurales mal desservies, peu desservies ou non desservies, est enveloppé au niveau de l'UIT dans un certain nombre de dispositifs que l'on appelle tous réduire la fracture numérique. Alors, cette réduction de la fracture numérique est visée par les résolutions de la plénipotentiaire, est visée par les résolutions de l'Assemblée mondiale de normalisation des télécommunications est visée par la Conférence mondiale du développement des télécommunications qui gère au quotidien, effectivement, la présence régionale de l'UIT. Alors maintenant, nous avons beaucoup utilisé le vocabulaire, surtout les économistes. Maintenant, le problème est de savoir, lorsqu'on parle de connectivité, il y a une définition essentielle. So we are always speaking of connecting, but it's a meaningful connectivity. So what's your criteria, your main criteria of a meaningful connection or meaningful connectivity? What's the official definition of this meaningful connection? In the room, can you give me one or two criteria for a connection to be meaningful? Yes, lady first, there, please. What are the main criteria to have a meaningful connections? Because you are connecting people in rural areas, that's okay. But if the connection is not meaningful, is to say we have one connection each Wednesday or once a month, it's not a meaningful connection. So they can be connected, but we need meaningful connections. So 3 or 4 criteria as approved by the Broadband Commission. Just to keep you informed that the new minister you see yesterday opening this meeting is part of the team. She's commissioner at the Broadband Commission. So please, 2, 3 parameters and criteria. I want to hear at least 3 or 4 parameters before going on the presentation of case studies of countries. Yes, please, madam.
Thank you very much. In Namibia, meaningful connection means that the broadband connectivity will be of such a quality of service and speed that it will allow the customer to participate in the digital economy. So to that extent, we do not consider 2G and 3G as a broadband service. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So one criteria is there. So connecting should be reliable with sufficient speed and so on. Some other criteria. There's at least 3, 4 criteria defined by Broadband Commission and approved by ITU to define what is meaningful connectivity. So you don't think that for Africa, affordability is one of the criteria. Service must be affordable for all people to access to it. And then sustainability. Okay, so these 3 parameters and criteria are essential for you. When you are speaking of connectivity, it should be a meaningful connectivity with affordability, reliability, sustainability, so that, okay, you can say that, okay, someone is connected with the same advantages than the other sides of the world. Donc, merci beaucoup. Résolution 139, résolution 37, résolution 44 et recommandations 17, 19 et 20 de la CMDT. Toutes ces recommandations visent la réduction de la fracture numérique, encadrent le rôle des pays que vous êtes, des opérateurs privés et des gouvernements. Alors voyons comment se passe un peu cette connexion des endroits peu connectés au Rwanda. Je vais donc demander à ma première panéliste de prendre la parole, d'Abla de Rura. Rura, c'est Rwanda Utility, qui est le régulateur qui régule le transport, l'énergie, les télécommunications. Alors, you have a flow from Rura for sharing your experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Jacques. Good morning, or yes, still good morning, everyone. As they said, my name's Kabasinga Dativa. I'm from Rwanda. I work with the regulatory authority. I am going to present about the bridging the digital divide in Rwanda, which is, of course, in relation with the connectivity. Thank you. I will start with the factors affecting broadband connectivity. As the lead there said, connectivity goes with a broadband. That's where we have the meaningful connectivity. So the factors affecting broadband connectivity are mentioned about the 5 A's. There is access or accessibility. To have accessibility. That means where the population is able to access the network or the devices, because there are some places where they can't even get access to the devices. We mentioned about the affordability. The population has to be able to access or be able to afford the services. We mentioned about the high cost of the devices and the low income earning, especially in our region of sub-Saharan region, where most of the people are of low income, and the devices are still expensive. There's also awareness where people don't know what exactly the broadband has for them. So we need to have awareness sessions or programs where I have to inform the population about what the broadband has for them. They have to get that knowledge. They have to have the programs or the content that is enticing or that is attractive to them. They also have to know about the security of the information they have to provide. You know, in most of the cases, when you, even the just smartphone, when you want to start using it, there's some information you have to provide. So the people using it must know the effect or the security of the information they provide, so that they may be able to welcome or to go for the service. The ability, how do I do these skills? This is about digital literacy. They have to be educated on how to use the digital devices, the digital connection, the digital services, how to access it, how to do it. There are some additional factors, including the language. Most of the content in the languages that most of our people do not understand. So we need to have the content in our local languages. We need to have the communal support, like where we need to the community has to be supported, has to be able to go for everything that is digital. Yeah. We have I don't think it's not. Anyway, I don't think you're using the slide I gave you, but it's okay. I'll go with it. But there's another slide I had shared. Anyway, can you continue with that? So, having said that, what should we do to have these factors catered for? We need the awareness, where we have to educate our people how to use the devices, how to access the services, how to benefit from the digital environment. We need to have the content that is interesting and relevant in our context. We need to have expertise. That's where we have trainings or digital education.
all the districts are connecting and so on. Can speak for is there any in your region in Rwanda which is not connected or not well served?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we go straight to the approaches that Rwanda has been using to ensure at least everyone is connected, or a number of, at least a good number of the population is connected. In this case, we have the One Government Network. This is where the government puts in much effort to have at least all the government institutions connected. We haven't got to all of them yet connected, but at least you can see a very good number of them are connected. Here I also mentioned that 89% of all the government services can be offered or accessed online. We have the subsidizing the internet in rural areas. Actually, this came with the emerging of COVID, where we found that it is important to get everyone connected, especially where we had the lockdowns and everyone had to work from home. So there was a program of subsidizing the rural connections, so that even those that were locked down in their rural areas can be able to work remotely. We have the Connect Rwanda Challenge. This came as an initiative to cater for the affordability of devices. Here it's an initiative where people or organizations were able to bridge for a certain number of devices, and even were able to decide on who to give the devices they pledged. So the main target was the vulnerable headed families, where they had to be given at least a smartphone that would enable the whole family to be able to access the services from where they are. We have the initiative where we have women in technology. This includes a number of initiatives where we include young ladies in technology education. They are being trained, especially from the Rwanda Coding Academy and other initiatives or other trainings. In this one, we at least make sure that 60% of the students are girls. Okay. This is a picture of one of the group of ladies that do business across the borders. We are given some of those smartphones so that they would be able to access smart services. Good. This is an initiative called the Giga Initiative. Actually, this is an initiative with by ITU through UNICEF, where they connect schools. And in Rwanda, we are able to connect 68 schools and 13 refugee camps. So this is a school that was connected, where they have the schools, the students and the teachers are connected, but even the citizens around, they are able to have the network, the connectivity. Here it is where the government, using the Universal Access Fund, they are able to expand or to subsidize or even to subsidize the construction of passive networks, passive infrastructure for the operators to be able to extend their network to the rural or to the unconnected areas. The digital ambassador came as a solution for the digital illiteracy, where they go around and train the citizens on how to use smartphones, on how to access digital information, on how to even to access the government services that are being offered online, so that even though they have those smartphones, they can be able to use them. Yeah, my way forward is to include all the stakeholders. We have the telecom operators, we have the government, we have the consumers. In this, we normally have the government sit down, forge their way of getting everyone connected, and forgetting that operators have a big role to play. The consumers have the information to provide on how and what they want or they need to get connected. Like in Rwanda, we have almost 90 something, above 90, the geographical coverage for broadband, but the usage is still low. So we need the contribution of all the stakeholders to at least get everybody connected, because we cannot manage to leave anyone behind. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Lativa. Next speaker, it's the second time he has the floor this morning, so most of his presentation was already presented in the previous auctions, experience of TCA and Tanzania. Please, David, can you come and to explicitly show us what Tanzania is doing, has done, in order to try to connect the unconnected. Thank you.
Okay, once again, greetings to all. We'll have a brief presentation on this subject matter. The introduction part is almost the same to the one I presented the other time. Then I'll talk a little bit about universal communication service access activities that are currently ongoing in our country. Thereafter, I will conclude with the future works of what needs to be done. We saw this one in our previous presentation. Here, the main focus on the government is about universal communication. We don't want to leave anyone behind. So the role of the government is to make sure that all citizens, Tanzanians, are connected and they get quality of service. So to me, when we discuss about connecting the unconnected, I know so far we have a big two challenges. First of all, we have a challenge of coverage gap and the usage gap. For those of you who are not aware, Tanzania, with a geographical size of almost 1 million square kilometers, it's a huge investment needed to cover all the people who are scattered across the countries. There are a number of people, they're still living in areas that have not yet been connected. But another big challenge is, as we've seen on the statistics provided by GSMA, number of articles, or World Bank, about some areas where the connections are there, the network are there, but there is a challenge of usage. So we need to look at these issues together, that we needed to address both of them. And in the priority, I think there is a number of times that we've been focusing on coverage, the rural and remote areas, but the reality is the usage gap, which is somehow is contributed by the coverage, but at the same time is contributed by other factors, need to be looked at carefully so that once it is well addressed, the usage gap, it will be also easy to address the coverage gap. And unfortunately, most of the time when we are saying there is a coverage gap, normally we refer to terrestrial services. In fact, in our sub-region, if we look on the solution that are already in place with the existence of space, there is no anywhere in our sub-region, sub-Saharan region, that has not been covered. So why has it been covered but people are not using it? Those are the issues that I think we need to discuss together and be able to address. So to me, I'm not just looking on connectivity as just having a network, but we need to look on a bigger picture that we have a connectivity of our people, accessibility and affordability. These three things need to go together if you want to address coverage gap and the usage gap. So these are the things that we need to discuss further on how we can handle each one of them so that we bring our people on board and not having a digital divide in one place of the country and the others are left behind. Currently, in Tanzania, we have a Universal Communication Service Access Fund. It's a separate organization that have been established by the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. We understand some other countries have a similar setup, but they have a department within the regulator. But for us, we decided to have an established organization separate to the regulator, that from the CEO to every person within that organization, when they go to the office, their focus is how are we going to bridge the gap of digital in our country. So we have this organization that was established, Parliament passed the law in 2006 and come fully in operation starting 2009 and has been working towards connecting the unconnected, especially in underserved, unserved areas. Initially, when it started, the really focus was to provide the basic communication. As you know, back then in 2000 or late 2000, the focus was mainly on 2G GSM services, where the basic service was just a voice and SMS. So that was the primary focus. But recently, I've been changed from just a communication service as just a basic voice and SMS, now incorporate offering mobile broadband to people in remote areas. So currently, this is what we have been seeing, identifying the unserved and underserved areas. And then this organization is establishing a tendering process where prospective network operators could compete on the identified areas to offer to provide communication services. And thereafter, the same organization is working with the regulator in establishing the quality of service and do the audit of those sites that have been erected or built by the MNOs to provide communication services over that areas. And so far, since it was established to date, there are more than 1,060 plus communication sites that have been built, and they are currently on air, providing mainly 2G and 3G services. But the plans are ongoing to make sure that these sites are upgraded to higher version, especially 3G and 4G, so that mobile broadband can be realized to people living in those unserved areas. Lastly, is the way forward. The challenge is there. I know it's not only Tanzania, different countries are trying to address these challenges, but I see we need to focus more on using various or different technologies that can address the issue of coverage gap, at the same time can address the issue of usage gap, both terrestrial and space. There is no way we can rely on just one particular technology expecting to have good results if we want to address these two challenges together. Also, collaboration among key stakeholders. We talk of government, non-government, or private sectors. We need to work together. And lastly is government incentives. Yes, people will come and shake hands with you, but at the end of the day, the government needs to work in this matter to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us move to the manufacturer experience point of view and what Huawei has to share with us in the techniques to try to have accessible connectivity in rural areas. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're nearly there, so just bear with me a number of minutes more. From our side, obviously, it's always exciting to be part of a workshop like this and to learn from one another, to open the debates. And it's a very important topic that we need to look at today. So I think we've established by a number of studies, and we all know the fact that mobile networks are critical by a large margin and is seen as the most important method to access the internet and to communicate on the continent. Rural, however, we know do remain a challenge for the obvious reasons. And we are realistic about these things and we understand it. As a vendor, we have been actively on the continent for more than 20 years, participating, walking the roads, and addressing these challenges. Policies are very, very important, and we need to ensure that they support the extension of mobile networks into those rural areas. And it can be a great asset in getting everybody together and align the objectives and to find common solutions on how to address these needs. And this can include things like subsidies. We've seen, we talk about subsidized services, I've heard. Even infrastructure, subsidized towers can be a very important component as well that can be considered. And then sensible coverage obligations can also be very, very important in achieving those objectives. But it needs to make sense at the end of the day for the operators to do it as well. Partnership projects, it's always a win-win. Infrastructure sharing mechanism and policies. There's a big focus on infrastructure sharing mechanisms from private sector and government sectors that we are unpacking and looking at on how can we consolidate and save costs ultimately in the end of the day to get to those underserviced areas. Vendors have an important role to play in designing equipment that reduce the cost of the deployments and ultimately provide that connectivity that we need to get to those people. Huawei, as an example, have commercialized a number of years ago already a solution that specifically addresses the deployment in rural areas and even more so in emerging markets. Our Rural Star solution has won a number of international awards. And it utilizes solar panels and lithium batteries. We all know about the importance of going green, and in those areas where we do have problems with power, which is critical. Without power, I simply cannot connect what needs to be connected. One base station can allow us connectivity up to 3,000 people in those remote areas. And we have successfully deployed this technology in more than 60 countries, connecting more than 50 million people. So we're super excited. We are always open to engage and discuss and together to find the solutions. But it's very, very critical that we come together and we unpack and we look at how it can be done. So my closing remark on this is when governments, operators and vendors work together, it is possible to extend those coverages into those unconnected areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the last speaker for these sessions has 2 slots. He will end by a short video so that everyone will be happy to follow up a video of a case study. Please, OneWeb will show to us what has been achieved globally and maybe bring us in other mountains in the world. You have the floor, please.
Thank you. Bismillah. So, hello everyone, and actually it is a pleasure to be here, and I will not take so much time, believe me. I will try to just conclude on what my colleagues just have mentioned, and very highly elaborated that. So, OneWeb actually is one of the companies that is trying to bring connectivity to all of the people. Connectivity everywhere by a uniform distribution network, operating the LEO system, operating the KU band. Sorry to be so fast, but I will try just to make it clear about the key messages that we would like to drive here to the community, and it is actually built on the regulatory findings of such proceeding. My name is Amr Ashur. I'm Government and Regulatory Engagement in OneWeb for Middle East and Africa region. I would like to start this presentation by highlighting the OneWeb goal is to connect everyone everywhere. And frankly, there was a word that I just get it when I just joined OneWeb, which is a very important word. This word was saying that no one left behind. For me, in the beginning, I didn't understand this word. It is a good theme. It's a good structure. Until I lived an experience in a certain area that this word comes out from a mouth of a person who is testimonying the services, that he was happy that he was not left behind. So as long as OneWeb services is available in some parts of the world now, especially on the northern part, I would like to drive for you today a case study for Alaska, which is a rural area in Akiak, a village there, where OneWeb was able to successfully connect the people there. For those who are not aware of Alaska, where it is, Alaska is in the northern pole part, which is major advantage of the satellite communication in general and the non-GSO system. So I would like to ask for the video, please.
Historically, our communications was a person going to the next village or by donkey, by boat. We had no electricity here, and we had no television, no telephone. Back in the 70s, we finally had the 24/7 electricity here. Right now, everybody has the cell phone. Many people just have the cell basic service, but they cannot afford data because it's so expensive.
Connectivity is something you shouldn't think about. If you're connected, you're not thinking about it. You know that someone can reach you, or you can reach someone. You can share information with someone. You can reach out to a loved one and just to say hi. That is what connectivity means.
It's just extremely important today to be able to have broadband. 20 years ago, telephones were the big focus, but today, if you don't have broadband, you can't communicate. Alaska is the only state that does not have the ability to connect everyone in the state to broadband today. And so with OneWeb, we have a partner that is helping us solve that to connect everyone across Alaska. The satellite fleet.
For a long, long time, we were left behind in Akiak. Our people in these rural communities have been left behind. So with OneWeb being launched, we took it upon ourselves to get this program going right away.
When we got the call from Akiak community to come in and bring broadband to their village, this system behind me is what we built. The fiber that connects to the Talkeetna, Alaska teleport, there are 29 ground stations there. Those ground stations communicate with the OneWeb satellites as they float over Alaska. Those satellites communicate with the two domes behind me, and it goes up to the top of the tower and then spreads out in the community. Every home has a panel on the outside of the home that goes into the home connects to a modem and a router, and then it's spread throughout that home. As the users connect to Wi-Fi and actually connect to the internet, it goes back the exact same way, back and forth all day long, and they're connected to fast broadband.
I'm taking classes to get my bachelor's degree in administration in the early childhood field. With the internet, it's made it a lot easier. I can see my professors during class. I can collaborate with my classmates, and then it's all in real time.
I have this one friend that's using broadband Wi-Fi for his college courses right now.
OneWeb has helped in a lot of ways. It's more convenient for us, like ordering supplies and payments over the phone.
What I want to look on YouTube is how to take off the bearings on both these front tires. All we can do is just look on YouTube, search it up.
I did learn how to make some recipes from online. I use Google a lot. So Google is like, even in my workplace and at home, Google's like my assistant.
Right now, we're enjoying the services that are available through OneWeb. A lot of our children are doing their educational work and also doing YouTube, and many of the homes downloading movies.
Like, it brought our family together, so we'd be able to like choose something new that we haven't watched yet, and we're so curious about it, so all of us would come home and watch a movie together.
My oldest daughter actually just left for a summer camp, and we had our first FaceTime I used OneWeb. I can text. I'm really grateful that we can see each other. She's going to be gone for 3 weeks. My baby's leaving, growing up. Hi, Jamie.
Broadband has really changed us around here. It's faster on our Zoom meetings, faster on everything that we do.
And our younger generation, because I'm not whiz on phone, internet and stuff. These little kids, they'll take your phone and fix it. Here, it's good. They're smarter than we are.
This project is important because rural Alaskans have really been cut out of the big picture when it comes to the internet. So what Pacific Dataport and OneWeb have done as a team is bring broadband to a village that wanted broadband in their community.
I'm excited with what OneWeb is bringing to Alaska. Not only the promise of connectivity in these remote locations, remote communities, or a remote work site, right? We are providing connectivity that simply wasn't available before.
OneWeb at this time is the answer to our situation of not being connected to the world affordably.
Situation that is happening here in Africa for rural areas and small population connectivities, where in which the satellite was able to contribute to that and to actually resolve this connectivity part, and of course adding a lot of ecosystem associated to that. So I would like and I will keep it for you after this one during the lunch, to interrelate what our colleagues have been speaking about, the affordability, the availability, the gaps, everything about the regulatory. What he's thinking of is addressed in blood and flesh in this video. Thank you for your time.
Merci beaucoup. Amr. Alors, merci pour cette connectivité intelligente, meaningful. Je préfère smart connectivity than meaningful. Or meaningful, but the word in English is more significant than in French. When you want to translate meaningful in French, it doesn't say anything. So this is what is a meaningful connectivity, affordability, sustainability, and most important, make the people happy. Okay, so thank you very much. We have 10 minutes for questions and answers. So those who wanted to address TC era, as our speaker was in the first sessions, time was short. So if you have been keeping in mind your questions for TCRA on the auctions and so on, and or the use of universal service fund to try to give access to rural areas. Rwanda has used also the same facilities with a very big support from the government in some rural areas also, but also using the universal service fund to try to design some of the projects or passive infrastructure and so on, and then leave a competition to mobile operators to provide the service. So questions, please. We'll take a range of 3 questions. Yes, I saw my elder sister Elizabeth. Yes, welcome. Maybe it's not a question, you know everything, but a contribution. Elizabeth, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I have a question. And first of all, an excellent video we just saw from OneWeb, really. So my question is, can you give us an idea of what the consumers have to pay for the service in Alaska, if possible? Just sort of ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you. Deuxième question. Oui, ici devant. Gambia, please, the Gambia. Question in the front from the Gambia. Microphone here, please. Second row.
Thank you very much, presenters. My question is directed to the rep from the TCRA. During his presentation, he made mention of the fact that on the 3.5 gig band, there were lots of 4 times 40, which is more than 100, and the 500 actually 3.5 just has 100 meg slots. So I just wanted to know whether it's a spillover to the other bands or not. Thank you.
Okay. Third question on the last. Yes, you have a gentleman on your right.
Thank you so much. My name is Moloi Mugeti from Lesotho. I think my question will be addressed to particularly Rwanda and Tanzania, I think, on rural connectivity and yourself. I think maybe it goes back to from yesterday and to the discussion that we have on terms of coverage and usage. So my question is on terms of affordability, in terms of power, because I think you have coverage, but then the usage and maybe the access to power can be a deterrent, because coming to the case of Lesotho, only 40% of households are connected to the main grid. So I'll be thinking, and the majority of the population is in the rural areas and there's no electricity. So maybe I wanted, as an advice, how do you begin to address that? Because I cannot buy a cell phone if I'm going to spend 20 days without power. So maybe I'm just asking a question, throwing you to the panel. I mean, how do we begin to, maybe outside the scope here, but it does affect the issue of usage, if then the power issue is not addressed. So how do you begin maybe to include other stakeholders along as we cover the coverage gap, and then maybe the issue of power comes along? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Please, Amr. Cost of all of these infrastructure and for the consumer.
Yeah. Thanks, Elizabeth, for this nice question. A very good question, but a very bad person to answer that one. So what I would like to say that this, of course, will be addressed in a dedicated paper that will be submitted to the ATU under the Rural Connectivity Initiative, which will include this portion, of course, which I'm actually eager to do that through the commercial part. Despite of that, what we can say by analogy, that the prices was very affordable for the consumers there, very affordable for the service provider there. What I would like to highlight here, that it is the most important part, is the regulatory regime that was not holding over much overheads for such services provision, as we see in many countries. So one of the challenges that we are facing, especially in Africa, that we have a very high level of fees that applied for services that by the end of the day, it is overhead the services to the end customer. And actually a big challenge while we are looking forward to connect those who are not connected. So we will consider this question further, and I hope that the submission to the ATU will be responding to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question answered. Yes, a question from the Gambia.
Thank you very much for the question regarding the spectrum assignment in 3500 megahertz band. Yeah, in Tanzania, like so many other African countries, they allocated the spectrum from 3400 to 3600 for IMT back then in 2012. And when you did the auction, already 40 megahertz was assigned to one of the operators. And because we do support technology and service neutral, that operator had already identified that he will use that spectrum for IMT 2020. So the remaining 160 megahertz was distributed in 4 different blocks of 40 megahertz each. So the entire band that have been allocated for IMT in our country for 35 is from 3400 to 3600. So it's not just 100, it's 200 megahertz. And to the second question that was posted from our colleague regarding the power challenge. Yes, Tanzania, like other third world countries, we have seen this as one of the challenge. So when the government established Universal Communication Service Access Fund, also the government established what we call Rural Electrification Agency, which was doing almost the same to UCSAF, identifying those areas that had power problems and trying to address through government incentives and some partners. And we've seen a very good move of so many villages connected to the grid in our country. So yes, not all the places that have been covered have been connected to the grid, but we have seen that these two things goes together, electrification, at the same time connecting using the mobile networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Rura, please, can you complete on green energy use in Rwanda for these energy and power facilities? I know that you are using solar energy, but also some other alternative solution. Can you give a reply to Lesotho, please? Yes, we are.
Thank you so much. In Rwanda, we, like any other African countries, we have a very big area that is not connected to the main grid. However, we have some solar solutions where different companies dealing with solar solutions, they have it's like a deal where they provide a package of a solar system to those households that are not connected to the main grid, that goes with a television, of course the lighting system and the charging system. So this system is paid in installments of a long time, like at least for 2 years, where at least people within those areas are able to have solar electricity, and that is mainly the way we are using to get those people at least access the connectivity. Also, the government has a plan to extend the main grid at least to the possible areas, a big number of it, so that we have electricity everywhere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Second set of questions. I have to conclude by 12:30, but I give you 2-3 more minutes for the second range of questions or contributions. We have here, please, Intelsat. Another one? No? Intelsat, please.
Yes, thank you. Hazem Wakat with Intelsat. So, having heard the problems that you're facing in deployment, which seems to be a lot of challenges with power, with infrastructure, right? So the question to the regulators, to what degree do you think giving more spectrum to mobile is going to solve your problems? I mean, do you really think that, based on, at least based on what I'm hearing, is that there's power problems, there's grid problems. So, but then at the same time, we hear this kind of repeated message: more spectrum to enable connectivity. How do you reconcile these two issues? I mean, how more spectrum? How do we answer that? How is giving more spectrum is going to solve these problems?
Okay, Bashir, please. Wandu, ITU Commonwealth. The chair. Bashir, please, your question.
Thank you. First, actually, my comments first to Amar and Tanzania. Amar, there was this question you tried to avoid. I think I'm going to still bring you back to it. How affordable? You said they can afford it. I mean, affordability in America is different from affordability in Nigeria or in Egypt or in Rwanda. What are they paying? How are the customers paying per month? Give us an idea so we can see whether that particular service is something we can deploy here. I think it's very important to be specific about it. So they can afford it. Affordability, I mean, different countries have different GDPs, different per capita income, so you need to help us on that. Second, I noticed in Tanzania, just like Nigeria, the whole spectrum has been awarded. Almost all the key spectrum bands have been awarded, just like Nigeria. That actually points to the fact that whenever you have a good regulator and you have obviously good, reasonable population, the spectrum tend to be fully occupied. So that's the reason why you still ask for more. I think that is very encouraging to see that we're not holding spectrum. The regulator is not sitting on the spectrum, is putting it out to the market. And I think if we're able to do that in many countries, a lot of the problems can be reduced. So now, I noticed something about the pricing. I mean, what do you think is the reason why 700 megahertz spectrum seems to have attracted better revenue than others? That's Tanzania. I saw that in your slide. What could be the reason for that? I'm sure there are a lot of consideration, but what is, in your opinion, the reason for that? Thank you.
Okay, this made the three questions. So we have some people online who wanted also to contribute, and the question was the same question than the one raised by Bashir here. How affordable is the OneWeb internet and so on? So speak clearly how much dollar has the customer to pay for a 1 month subscription and to be connected and benefit from this knowledge online. How can broadband satellite internet be set up in rural Uganda? So you will have to wait this afternoon. We have a session devoted to satellite, and you have all the satellite operators institution here. We will give you some ideas of how to connect rural areas in Uganda. So we leave this question for this afternoon. But now, gentlemen, yes, can you complete the second set of questions? OneWeb?
Yes, so as I just mentioned, so thanks, Dr. Bashir, for highlighting this part. This is a very important question, and yes, it differs from country to country, depending on the GDP. But I would like just to make the analogy that the other services as well is available in the same country. But in terms of the durability and the reliability and the availability, OneWeb was better choice for those people in this low population area. The prices indeed is a very important factor, but by the end of the day, OneWeb is not offering the service to the end customers. The service provider, incumbent licensed service provider who provide the service to the end customer. So the exact prices is actually on the service provider hand side. As OneWeb, it's just an bent pipe to communicate the link from a point to point. But what the service charges is related to the service provider. This is why we are eager to put that into the case study that we are willing to submit to the ATU for the consideration of the rural activities, rural areas case studies. I hope this may address at this point. But of course, we will have a further discussion on that. Thank you.
Okay, why more spectrum needed when the environmental conditions are not fixed? You are always suffering from power, from other maybe difficulties. So who wants to take this one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The lady first, yes. Latifa, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. I think the concerns of spectrum and electricity are two major factors to be considered, but differently, though they are connected somehow. The spectrum issue is just to make sure that operators, they don't complain that they don't have enough resources to get those people connected. So they have to get a spectrum. Here I have to mention that we have, as regulators, to monitor what they already have, to make sure they have already used it sufficiently to give them more spectrum. Again, the electricity part has to be considered on a different perspective, to get these operators get infrastructure, get network in those areas without complaining that they don't have a way of connecting. Where we don't have the main grid, we have to get solar or any other way of getting those areas connected. I think this is how I have to answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bon, mesdames, messieurs, merci beaucoup. Le temps imparti, je voudrais que vous applaudissiez mes panélistes. Nous avons terminé notre session. A range of applause in English for the panelists. If you don't understand French. So let me conclude by saying that, okay, in order to connect the unconnected area, we first need engineering, because it's not one single solution. You have a mix of solutions, satellite, platforms, whatever, wireless access, and so on. But you have also, now in the pipe, HAP, LAP, all these platforms are there. And of course, the new networks, air to earth. And by the way, just to inform you, but next week, we'll have in Riyadh how to connect from the sky. An ITU conference with the contribution of Saudi Arabia, which is a very important one, not only for scientific services and so on, but also to tackle some rural areas to try to connect the unconnected. So thank you very much for your contribution to this panel. I give the floor to Dan for the lunch and other announcement. Thank you, Dan. Back to you.
Thank you to JJ, and thank you to all of our panelists. And sorry we've had to cut the discussion, the Q&A a little bit short there. But I'm sure if anyone does have any questions or comments for any of our panelists that weren't answered, then please do come and find them during lunch. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to discuss those with you. But we do now have lunch. I think we're going to have to try and cut it a little bit short. And if I could ask everyone to try and be back in here by about 1:15. So in about 35 minutes or so, that would be appreciated. But thank you to JJ and the panelists. Thanks to everyone. Enjoy lunch, and we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you.